So we just got an announcement. I don't know if you saw this, Yamato, like literally 5 minutes ago.
What happened?
The Chemtech Drake has been removed from the game.
Really?
I'm not fucking with you. They literally are doing like a 12.2 mid patch. They're disabling the Chemtech Drake.
For what reason? Is it bugged or is it like, fuck it?
I think it's fuck it.
Okay.
So I mean, I'm impressed because I didn't think this would happen.
Oh.
But I am pleased. I am pleased. I maybe they'll rework it and introduce it later. But I am super happy that we're not going to get that much actual competitive esports play with that in the game.
Right, Yamato, I've got to ask you this question, right? One thing I hate about when people are in teams and they do the PR side is it's a famous thing in League of Legends. They try to downplay the expectations because they don't want the players to feel, pressure and that. Like, here's the thing, mate. I'm sorry, in your team, you don't have any rookies, mate. You have people who are all established. They've all either won. Yeah, basically, realistically, this lineup's supposed to win the splits, right? It's supposed to be the number one Western team.
No, for sure. Like, for me, if we don't win titles, like, I have failed. That's how I'll view it. There's no other way to view it, you know. Like with this roster, I feel like on paper we're the strongest. And I understand, you know, the moment Perkz touches a roster, that's going to be the super roster, and that's what people are going to look at because, you know, Perkz has that charisma about him. But we have on paper, in my opinion, the roster that should win it all. And then to bounce back on the Chemtech Drake, I'm curious about the reason. I'm really curious about if it's a bug or if it's just okay.
Investigating it, it turns out Reginald actually invented the Chemtech Drake. So this is the first of the steps of penance. They're going to take it back, apologize. You know, that's how toxic he is. I mean, he actually invented the Chemtech Drake.
Are you upset that it's removed? Like it could be gone forever, as far as I'm concerned, and that's just wonderful.
Honestly, I didn't mind it too much. I understand that it removes, you know, an important nuance to how you can play, like the defensive play. But in my opinion, it also just, if you go a couple of layers deeper, you could just be the one sitting in the Chemtech fog first, even if you're being the defensive side. So I think there was like layers to it that you could peel away, but due to the fact that it's such a rare occurrence and we don't have any functional way of practicing it, which is so stupid. Like we could do 40 scrim games, never see Chemtech Soul, and then all of a sudden we're on stage and then there's Chemtech Soul and all of a sudden, you know, it's like, what are we doing?
Look, I'm with you that it's okay as long as they show Drake spawn order in Champion Select, which has been something I have been talking about since Elemental Drakes were introduced, so that you could, first off, like you're saying, why can't you practice with it? I mean, there's a lot of issues with practicing in League of Legends, right? But sure, why can't you practice with it would be number one complaint. Number two complaint is, even if you don't practice with it, you could at least potentially design strategies for it because it's so unique, as long as you knew it was coming. The problem is that now that they have added 2 more Drakes, it just fucks it up even more that you cannot draft around these circumstances. And by the way, guys, I've talked to people at Riot who have straight up told me that it isn't an engineering problem. This is absolutely possible for them to do. They just won't fucking do it. Okay? So
do they have a reason that goes the other way as to what, like, do they think it adds spontaneity or something? What was their reason that it's good?
I don't know.
That's like, to be variance,
I think so. Here's the thing about game developers is that because this is like the game that all game developers play with the professional scene, which is that because they have to balance the game a lot of times for a casual fan base, which totally makes sense. What they'll say is, adaptability is a hallmark of the esports scene, where we prize, like when we're testing, the test of competitive play over the long term is adaptability, which is obviously garbage for games that hardly change at all, like Counter-Strike or Brood War, which are the 2 greatest esports of all time, hands down, because they don't require adaptability, and you actually get to see distinct players with very, very unique styles playing the game, which in my mind is much more satisfying than watching some dude who's like okay at everything. So partially that. But also, just as a side note, if you're testing for adaptability, then your competitive systems must also test for adaptability. You know what doesn't test for adaptability? Fucking best of one and single elimination. You cannot say it is illegal. It is fucking illegal to say you are testing for adaptability and then design competitive structures that do not also test for adaptability. Fuck you. So anyway, that aside, I think that if you had the spawn order of the drakes and you could actually account for it, that's one thing. But in the absence of that, because it's so different than every other of the drakes in the game, you can't do it. You can't have it in the game.
No, for sure. My issue is the variance, right? Anything in a competitive game that creates any level of variance is counterintuitive in my opinion, right? It's like how they've managed to figure out the crit issue. I like that because it limits the variance in some sense, but at the same time, crit inherently, like you don't want it to come down to luck. It's like, oh, the enemy team killed the second Drake. Oh, the soul is Cloud, and all of a sudden their hard work doesn't matter, or in some cases we're stronger or worse. Like this variance part of it is a bit silly. And I remember, for example, our game against Astralis, right? They had massive bounties, and I believe that the design, from what I've perceived from my anecdotal evidence, is that the weight of dragons is way too heavy skewed in the contrast of gold, and it looks like drakes are worth around 2,000 to 2.5k gold, which makes absolutely no sense with some of the stats that you get from some of these shitty ass drakes. And I remember that game, we were like 3-4k gold ahead, and then we had 3 drakes ahead of them, and then they had like these objective bounties. And then they got to like make some minor comebacks due to some of the slip-ups that we made. Sure, we could play better, but that variance, if it was great dragons, okay, but the value of the drakes differs, the value of champions on maps also differs, creates additional variance, which I'm not too big of a fan of. I
want to ask you this actually, Yamato. You're someone where if people listen to your kind of philosophy of the game over the last few years, I would think you're somewhat at odds with sort of the design path we've gone down here, where if you've seen, like Riot the last few years has essentially just told teams how you're going to play the game. You're going to group and team fight around these dragons. If you don't, in fact, at certain points team fight, you literally lose the game. They get the mechanic that makes them win the game after one successful team wipe. So, what have your thoughts been the last few years? Like, has it been a bit more limited, like your options as a coach? Because you coached for many, many years, going back into very different metas, obviously.
I think looking back at the like most recent years, I don't feel like the New Year season patches have been, controversial enough to stir up any new thoughts. Like we had the item upgrades, which shifted around the meta a little bit, but the idea of the game was the same. It's like you can still go back to like down one winning worlds and still learn and apply a lot of those ideas today. Sure, you can go further back and still do that, but the changes that occurred between the seasons were always a lot more grand, and like there was the
last big one was probably like the
so
keystone runes was probably the last
major
shift.
Like the keystones, right? And I don't remember the order of the specific, but there was like one time they added plants, which I just added another layer to the game, and like anything that's new for me personally is very exciting because this is what keeps the game fresh for me, right? And I understand that we are playing under the same circumstances as our opposition, so we're just playing the game and we're trying to play the same game better than the enemy, right? So whatever changes come my way, I'm fine and happy with it. But I feel like the last couple of years, the meta of how you play the macro game, it's been fine-tuned, but it's been relatively the same. It's like how you set up your Rift Herald, how you set up the Drakes, and then it's just the patterns of the games have looked quite similar. And I was hoping that maybe with the changes to the outer towers, with the gold changes and the implementation of some items, some split push items here and there with the hull breaker, I thought it would change, but it's so.
It has changed a little bit. I think like the gold stuff has changed. I mean, it certainly has changed Herald Priority, and it did before, Worlds Worlds was much more Herald Priority, and we saw it late in the summer splits across regions last year. So I guess for me, it does feel like it's changed slightly, but I agree. I mean, the biggest change is honestly now that Chemtech Drake is gone, because Hextech Drake is like, I think it's fun. I like it. But,
I would say like the TP change, right? The TP change. That was an interesting, right?
Rubber band mechanics, gold bounties, right? These are the two big changes that we've seen come in. And TP change is fucking massive, actually.
I think that's a good change, though. I like it. I like the idea you couldn't do the cancel, dude.
I don't know. I'm watching these games and I'm still like, I'm like 50-50 on it because I see some instances where it's opened up bot lane a lot, is what I'll say. Like, you look at the priority on Caitlyn right now, and Caitlyn offers so much to this game that was kind of, I would guess, less accessible before. Because of the TP prevalence that could happen from the mid and top laners into the bot lane, because her intention is to shove up very deep into the lane and apply pressure. And not only that, but in the mid and late game, her traps are just oppressive for professional teams around objectives. They are so good when it comes to setting up for dragons or for barons, that she's just super strong right now. And I would say that's mostly a result of the teleport changes, allowing people to play more aggressively.
Think about last year, the way it was going at the end of last year, ADC was just never going to be a relevant fucking role again, mate. It would always just be like the king of the cleanup fucking roles. And it was never going to, the joke is, everyone was hyped in the offseason that Uzi is coming back. Spoiler, it wouldn't matter if Uzi came back. Like, you couldn't play like Uzi, could he? Like, you couldn't build a team around him in the meta we had last year. Like, it would just be irrelevant. You wouldn't be able to win. Am I wrong? What do you think, Yamato?
I had to think back.
You had the best bot lane, arguably, and even for you guys, it was tough, right?
I believe that with how a lot of the fights were structured around mid and how impactful TPs were around bot, it definitely was harder to be like the most impactful point, because usually if you're a stronger bot, the purpose of it was to enable your support to just impact the whole map and just be first everywhere, right? Yeah. With the way we played, we just tried to squeeze water from stone, and we knew we would eventually hit a wall, right? Like when we scrimmed against like the stronger bot lanes, like the EDG's bot lane, then all of a sudden we met our match. We're playing against a bot lane that can actually lane, and we wouldn't be able to squeeze water from stone, and all of these other elements would come into play, and all of a sudden the AD carry role wouldn't be as impactful as we could make it over here in Europe. But definitely, I think that there were roles that were far more impactful last year. I believe like mid, jungle, support were just like the engines of what was happening in the game, and then top lane and AD carry had to adjust to whatever these three other roles were, presenting to them. And sure, individual gaps happen, but that has nothing to do with the theory of the game, right? So I would be inclined to agree. It's just a question of how much better are you than someone else.
Yes.
I think Viper was phenomenal, right? He was definitely like a step ahead of everyone else, but when you think of the role as a whole, then definitely it would be like you would have to be so much fucking better than everyone to stand out, that it would be a little bit too hard for AD carry to have like more impact than like the enemy mid being stronger than your mid laner, right? So I agree.
I think it's just like it's changed the game so much too, because there were always times where you could TP bot, get a few kills, and then it changed the bot meta. Like, we're seeing a lot of support diversity right now that I don't think we would see if you could still TP onto a minion wave prior to 14 minutes into the game. Just because like there's too much, these champions are too squishy or whatever. They're designed to be poke champions that win lane gradually over time or help clear minion waves in order to push primarily. So I think it's allowing us to see more bot lane diversity and supports. I don't think it's allowing us to see a lot of AD carry diversity, because what's being prioritized now are AD carries that either shove very aggressively in the early game, or who provide like very strong zoning or tower pushing abilities, like Jinx chompers, Caitlyn traps. I mean, these are things that have just immense value in the late game, but the problem was getting them through laning phase before they got TP'd on and just died, right? So I think it's kind of a give or take here on that front, and I also think it's limiting the mid pool, just because if you can't TP, you have to rely on I don't know, being Twisted Fate or pushing your lane, like having a high amount of wave clear in order to roam, or having semi-globals or long-range engages like champions like Corki with Package or Vex, for example, in order to affect the map. Because the thing about professional play is that map movement and movement speed is always going to be king at the professional level. Always. You either have to nerf those champions into the ground so they're completely unviable, or they start to take over. And I mean, we've seen this time and time again in metas. And I think we'll see how it develops, but I think the TP changes have limited some of the other rules. But you see a lot more carry tops now too. So, it's give and take.
And now obviously Rise uses even more OP. So there you go.
Yeah. For sure.
All bow to Rise, which we all must apparently. It's the way that used to even be. You remember this dude? You used to be a top laner back in the day. You remember back when it used to be presented by the mid laners that it was just like some conspiracy. Like, what are you talking about? Like ADC, top lane, and mid are all like equally good roles. It's about the skill of the player, bro. It's like that argument ended about like 7 years ago. It's just been mid the whole time, hasn't it? Like every now and then, if you're lucky as a top lane, you might get a carry meta. ADC outs has barely had any for years and years and years. It just occasionally has a broken champion like a Aphelios. It's just been mid lane the whole time. Like the joke is mid lane just is the protagonist of the fucking League of Legends team. At best, at this point, ADC is like the wacky friend like Kramer who just busts in the door at one point and you just enjoy him for 5 minutes. That's it, isn't it? You don't even get to play the whole episode. For fuck's sake, I'm not even on camera. Bjergsen's just through here, then Doublet's like in another room going, when's my cue? When do I hit my spot?
I remember back in season 2 when I'm playing top lane, I'm like level 12 in the game, I pan over to mid lane, Froggen over there, level 16, he took every raptor, every wolf on the map, and it's like, what am I supposed to do with my champ? It's like, I'm hoping that my mid lane is a bit higher level, or use XP Quints, and it was just like a battle of who could funnel their mid laner better, and then it's like, season 3, the World Championship was like, who could gravitate towards mid and just find action on mid, whatever spare time you have, you just go towards mid. It's like, I was rewatching some of the like SKT games of them playing in spring and so forth. It was just a question of who could just walk towards mid. Whenever you have free time, you have a break, okay, go towards mid, just go towards mid. And that theory has remained very similar. It's like the most central point of the map. The wave crashes the earliest, you have access to everything, you have mid prior, you can choose, and that choice can always be the right one if you're good. So it's like, I feel like that's just a fundamental part of the game, and as long as they don't like drastically change how the map looks, that's always going to be true. I think mid lane is always the most important, and I think it's always evident with the teams that actually win championships in the end, right? It's like, who's the mid laner that's standing there, and it's always great players, while in other roles maybe you can get away with having someone that is like
you can win worlds with Gingoon or whatever. Yeah, exactly.
This guy won a split, holy shit.
Yes, exactly.
Okay.
I mean, it's the same shit in like the NFL, right? Like you're just not going to get very far without having a strong quarterback, because they're the focus of play. And when mid lane basically controls priority over the objectives and can help gank the other side lanes, it's just unavoidable. You're in the center of the action, and like it's imperative to have that player.
That's even a point I figured out a few years ago that other people don't think about. When people compare the eras, but without the context of the meta and where the game was, they talk like, like for example, in the West, obviously you would compare like Prime Bjergsen with Caps, with Perks, whatever. Here's the one angle they don't get on that one, Yamato. The reason why nobody will ever look like Season 3 Faker is because no matter who you are, there is no access to Deathfire Grasp Ari, which is probably the most broken shit of all time. Like, think about what the old kit was, and Deathfire Grasp. And like you say, you've had all the resources funneled into you the whole game. The joke is, like, the second one of those gets let loose, you're like fucking Jason in like Friday the 13th. You're just popping up behind motherfuckers, just deleting them from the game. Like every other person just running. Like it's like Jurassic Park when the T-Rex are going, get out. Like, now you've just got normal chat. Like got like Orianas with normal things.
It was more like Jurassic Park and the Velociraptor just coming from the jungle behind you when you didn't even see it. You just instantly die.
Shit ever. I know.
Just comes in from LeBlanc, just sails in from Fog of War and just one shots you.
Exactly.
Good times. Like at one point in season 2, I realized my role is so useless. So I was like, I told my bot lane, just go top, screw with the guy. I'll pick something that survives. Okay. I'll buy 14 potions, and I'll just try to cheese my way to being useful. And that's how important my role was.
Anyway, yada yada yada. Now he's the coach of Fnatic.
Yeah.
Like 8 years later or something.
So Yamato, what do you think about these TP changes? Because these are like massively consequential at the professional level.
I like them a lot. I think you can get away with a lot less in terms of individual play, like in terms of how you manage your lane, in terms of how you manage your bot lane as well. There's no like cheat code that you always have to think about and then hope that sometimes they forget. You place a cheeky ward that doesn't get swept, and then you TP, and then all of a sudden you win a game that was inherently was supposed to be lost. Sure, in some shape or form, it's cool to have that element of play where you activate team play from such an early point in the game, but in some shape or form, it already is, right? Like you gain information. Let's say I push bot, I place a ward on their golems, I'll have information for the whole map. So in some shape or form, of course, everything's connected, but I like that expression of individual skill. I think it shows a lot more when there is no TP coming behind you to just crack you in the head. How you lane top, how you lane mid, how you lane bot is a lot more relevant, and I like that a lot because I feel like that part of the game is fading away more and more with time as people understand how to be more efficient with their time and so forth, and how to squeeze, everything out. So I'm very happy that players like, for example, my bot lane gets to actively play the 2v2 and the 3v3 with jungle, and they get to like push, and like Wunder gets to play an isolated lane. They only use the TP to get back. Like it's so boring when you play top lane and then like you're winning and then the guy bases and he's completely screwed. TP's bot gets 3 kills, comes top, and he's like, you see his like smirk, he thinks he's really good at the game, but in reality there was just a grief opportunity that opened up. So I like the fact that post 14 minutes, the macro game remains the same and TP remains the same.
I like that too.
And it allows for some, exploration of diversity of summoner spells. Like you play Ignite, you can play like no flash, you can play Flash Ghost. There's a lot of things that you can do with it, and I welcome this type of change. I like this type of change.
I also like the fact, because I'm a jungler enthusiast, like the jungle mind games are much cooler, I think, pre 14 minutes now, because you can't just have the like get out of jail free card where you call in all your TPs to like fix your fuck up or whatever, right? Or like engage in some giant fiesta in the bot lane. And also, I think it's been interesting to watch so many engaged junglers be played, which I think, I'm curious why you think this is, but I think it must partially, clear speeds and everything like that, but it's also the enchanters in the bot lane really enable a lot of these engaged junglers, right? Like if you have a Lulu or you have a Karma, it's a lot easier for you to get in and have high survivability as a jungler if you're Diana or Jarvan or Lee Sin or any of these picks.
I feel like the formula for jungle has remained the same for so long, right? It's like champions that can clear quick, fight level 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and then the champions around them change. They come and go, whether it's Leona, Tristana, Lux, Lulu, Kate, Karma. They come and go, but the champions remain the same. I remember back in the day, we had maybe 3 seasons of only Elise, Gragas, Lee Sin. No other jungler existed. Sometimes the Rek'Sai showed up, and I feel like right now it's kind of similar way, right? It's like Xin Zhao, Lee Sin, then Diana showing up every now and then. These champs function almost under any circumstances, and with the champions you mentioned, the Lulu and the Karma, they're very happy to have them. They're very happy to have a Leona, Nautilus. They're just like so meta-proof because their clear speed is good, their itemization is really good since the Mythic rework. Gore Drinker Sterak's is probably like the most purchased item of all time when it comes to like the average of what you see when you're playing, like looking at the pro game. So I think it's just a question of these champions just fitting that niche perfect, that they don't have any specific timing where there's a massive power dip. The clear speed is good. They fight a level 3 good. They contest on level 5 around mid when like 5:30 wave when mid laners are contesting for 6 good. There's never like a real power dip where you have to wait for something specific. I feel like that part of the jungle has almost been filtered out. There's very rarely where someone's playing a jungler where they're like, oh, I need to farm to level 6 to be useful, when that was like a very common trend in the past. And now it's just about just have a champ that bases on pickaxe of the first clear and make sure that you're there when your bot pushes all the way.
That's fair enough.
Much.
Yeah, that's fair enough. I also, though, we do have engaged supports in the meta, but with fewer engaged supports being played overall, and more carry top laners, that role, the engaged role, is being shifted to jungle as well, I feel.
No, for
Probably
sure.
a bit annoying if you had Hylissang on your team. You know, a guy who basically is engage. That's just it. Like, Hylissang's his alternate identity. Engaging is the first thing he does in life. You are what you do in life, Monte.
It was such a tough thing last year, guys. Like I was trying to teach the concept last year of, guys, if we are outranging them, the enemy must engage onto us. And
Hylissang was like, that famous gift of the guy, like the universe exploded in his brain onto us.
We have poke advantage.
I know.
I remember this presentation I made. I was like, any ability that is good for engaging is probably better if the enemy is running into you. Horn.
There you go.
Like any ability in the game is better if the enemy is running into you. And it was like, I remember so many arguments.
Did you just talk to Hylissang? You're like, look, Hylissang, peeling, an ability to engage is twice as good when used for peeling every time.
Yeah, pretty much. I remember these conversations. It was like Bwipo and Hilly as players, they are so good at finding opportunities. They just want to squeeze water from stone. And I'm like, guys, you don't need to squeeze water from stone. There's a whole river right there. You just pick up a cup and drink, It's like, it's so often, we contested the mid wave, the enemy team is backing up, and then it's like, Bwipo saw some Scion ult, and then he explains, this whole science project to me. He's like, yo, if we played this good, and my teammate didn't grief, and he hit the spell, if we played this correctly, mechanically good, then this would have been beautiful. And I'm like, but if we just stepped into the river and they had to face check us, what would have happened? We will never know because we are just taking every opportunity that comes,
Do you feel like that's something he improved on heading into this year? Do you still fight that battle?
Well, I think it's easier because I think sometimes, players tend to mold into the character that they believe this alteration of a roster requires in order to win games. And for example, last year, if Hilly and Bwipo didn't take that charge, nothing would happen. But this year, there is that trust and reliance on, for example, how we play side lane, the opportunities Wound is going to find, the opportunity Marek's going to find. There's a lot more trust, and you don't feel forced to actively engage and find opportunities. Because often what occurred last year was someone had flashed down. And let's say Hilly was playing Morgana. It's like, okay, I'm playing Morgana. No one's punishing this guy's flash. 5 minutes, we didn't do anything. And that can be like, if we don't use this opportunity, we're going to lose the game. And then it turned into Morgana flash queuing to try to engage, which feels kind of counterintuitive with what Morgana wants to achieve. So it's always like that with players, right? When they are in a specific team, for example, if we look back at 2020 roster when they played with Nemesis and Selfmade and Reckless, they felt like in this particular roster, they needed to do specific things in order for them to win. And I've had this conversation many times. It's like a concept of mine. It's the same where I remember last year people saying, oh, Jizuki is just inting. But this is Jizuki thinking he needs to achieve certain things in order to win with the roster that he has. It was the same thing before he had Danny, right? It's like you need to overperform in order to win. And if you don't, then it's not good enough. It was the same thing for us. We were playing bot in a way, we were trying to get everything. My bot lane was forced to play at 120%. They were forced to take risks that necessarily aren't good in the long term, but they had to play for those and try to squeeze water from stone just because that is the context of our team, right? So now in the current alteration, it's like we're playing a lot of Zilean. Hilly is still engaging, but there's a lot more freedom due to the power of players that you have, right? It's like if you are playing in a team where you can reliably think, I'm not doing so hot right now, but I got homies that are gonna back me up. That opens up for so much more depth in terms of what your play can and can't do, and allows you to strive for higher highs.
Want to see more cool, funny, interesting clips based on topics from my content? Well, subscribe to this channel then, or, be a pleb and don't.